Good day, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Skytale Insights. Extremely excited for today as we welcome Erik Haines, head of Guidepoint Qsight. Qsight's a division focused on providing alternative data-driven insights in the healthcare markets. Erik, thank you so much for being on. Would you mind introducing yourself and Qsight?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. It's great to be here. I know we've had a number of conversation over the years, so really excited to have the opportunity. So yeah, I head up Guidepoint Qsight. We're a division of Guidepoint that focuses on select markets within healthcare, one of them being the medical aesthetic space. I've been with the firm for, gosh, going on almost a decade now. My background is really in data. For the past 15 plus years, I've been working to build data-driven insights for specifically for markets where there's a lack of visibility, a lack of insight. So at Qsight, one of our main areas to focus on in the aesthetic space was really to bring this type of rich, quantitative insight to the industry. So really excited to be able to do that. So that's a key focus for us and something I'm very passionate about personally.
Thanks, Erik. Yeah, I mean, your background, blends very nicely with what we're talking about today, which is the Qsight and Skytale white paper we both recently published. Extremely excited about it. Some just really amazing data, and everything you said lends really well into this. It feels like a while ago that you and I and a couple of your team members were in New York. I was there for a month, kind of living there, and you were kind enough to do a lunch with me, and we had this dream of, wouldn't it be great to put a real true comprehensive white paper together? And here we are. It became a reality. And you talked a little bit about kind of the driver behind putting together this report. So that's exciting. So with that, in addition to the driver, like, what are your goals, your intentions with this white paper? What do you hope the market gets out of it?
Yeah, absolutely. So continuing on from what I was saying before about being able to bring data and data-driven insights to markets and market segments that have, for whatever reason, not been able to truly get that objective view. And so one of the big initiatives that we've had at Qsight since I joined was going beyond just small sample survey data, and trying to be able to measure the market, understand specifically the medical aesthetics market in a truly meaningful and novel way that many other industries and sectors, particularly in healthcare, where there's a whole bunch of data, just really being able to bring that to the medical aesthetic space. And with that, one of the great data assets that we've acquired, cultivated, and really working with is this data that's based on actual medical aesthetic point of sale transactions. So this data set covers multi-billions of dollars of transactional data, and we're able to do very, very detailed analysis, but also at the same time get a really great view on what's going on with the market overall. And so for us, having worked very hard on the data science side, just with the team building up the ability to do the analysis of this data, of course, we want to showcase this. I mean, this is something our clients historically have been device manufacturers, pharmaceutical companies, but really it's great to be able to partner with Skytale to be able to show what this data can really say about this industry. So in the past, there hasn't been this type of data at this scale and this richness to be able to speak to some of the things that we were able to do. So to answer your question, felt that was an excellent way to communicate that, partner with you guys, Skytale industry experts, us with this really great data set, and really start to understand some of the key trends of this very dynamic, interesting space in medical aesthetics.
Yeah, and I think, we have similar goals here for this white paper. For us, it was, a couple, 2, 3 years ago when the market really started consolidating. we would receive so many phone calls from financial sponsors to really just talk about their thesis in the space. And here's what we think. Is that what you're seeing? So on and so forth. But to your point, Erik, at that point in time, especially there, it was a lot of this is what I feel, this is what I think, this is what I see on a small scale, meaning, the clients we work with, people we interact with. But, to be able to prove it out to this level, to this detail is just so exciting. And it's a bit of a dream come true. And, for us, similar to what you were saying, partnering with someone like Qsight was a no brainer because when you told us and showed us the data that you had, I mean, just based on what we do, we're financial data junkies. It was just extremely exciting. So, now we're able to move to the next phase, right? Where not only have sponsors at this point created some platforms, and some sponsors are getting into this space still, now we're able to say, one, was the thesis correct? What is it that we're seeing, both sponsors and us? And now we're able to actually prove it. Like here are the statistics behind why we're excited about the space, maybe things to look out for and watch out for going forward that you should be aware of also. That part's exciting. And then, on a personal level, for our consulting clients, they tend to be, kind of multi-site wanting to grow and scale. We have a lot of discussions around, hey, have you thought about doing this in your practice? Or this is how you compare to industry and so forth. Well, this just added on to that, right? Now they're able to see, how they really compare to the market at large, and not just in a broad level. Like, I mean, we get pretty specific here when you divide it out by region and service type. And I mean, just so much good data. So extremely excited that the market now has, kind of more comprehensive data, as you were talking about. You're in other spaces where the data is there, and here it hasn't been, and we'll get there. And this is a huge first step, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. It's been really exciting to even hear from our clients just how this level of visibility is transforming the industry and understanding of what's truly going on. So very excited to work with you and participate in bringing this type of insights to all industry stakeholders, because right, the thriving industry, this thriving growth really kind of benefits all participants, and that's something we're happy to be a part of.
Yeah, it sounds like we're aligned there, Erik. So, for those of us that haven't, seen the white paper, read through it, maybe they're starting to dig into it a little bit. You and I had our fingers in it, I think, for a few months now. So I'm sure there are things we both found interesting. We chatted a little bit on it. But, maybe we can talk about some sections of the white paper and have some good back and forth. I mean, one for me that stood out immediately was, I'm reading through it early on, and I saw, and then it's been updated since, but I saw 2023 dermal fillers down significantly compared to 2022, while other services had been up. And now that rebounded in the first half of 2024, which is exciting. But I remember when I first saw that, I was asking some, really medical experts, doctors, what happened here? Any thoughts? And some of the comments we kept hearing were like overfilled facial syndrome, in addition to like just the accelerated acceptance of biostimulators, because it tends to be more natural, although more gradual results too. So I thought that was an interesting, well, like, yeah, that makes sense because of this, but we've seen a rebound. And it was really neat as the data came out that it was kind of proven true. But I'd love your thoughts about, we talk about dermal fillers. What are some things within the report that you found interesting that we could chat through?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. One of the questions we look to answer is we just try and understand what's going on with the market overall. How are these different categories performing? One of the main metrics that we have kind of baseline is like overall non-surgical spend, or patient spending on aesthetic treatments overall, dermal fillers, injectables, devices, weight loss, et cetera, increased 4% 2023 versus 2022. So there was growth, that you might argue with respect to inflation kind of creates a question of actual growth or not, but nonetheless, that it was a good baseline to understand what's going on in the industry overall. Now, to your point on dermal fillers specifically, now those had a tough year. Looking at 2023 versus 2022, based on our numbers and our estimates, we saw that actually decline 7% year over year. And that was really driven, as you mentioned, by HA fillers. From our data, we actually saw that BioStim increased 5% 23 versus 2022. So strong year for BioStim, but that's still it typically makes up less than 20% of dermal filler purchases. So in that time, we've seen BioStim increase, and going into Q1, Q2 of this year, really seeing that BioStim approaching that 20% of the spend in fillers. The HA fillers still kind of normalizing as we're seeing the start of Q1, Q2 mentioned a rebound. And I think some of that rebound is actually attributed to the growth in number of practices. Because if you look on a per practice basis, it's still relatively flat from a year over year perspective. It's those new practices that are kind of driving some of that growth. But nonetheless, I think, is this bottoming out? Are we going to start to see the growth? I've spoken to folks in the industry. They really think that's the case, and we're going to be tracking that really closely. Another interesting dynamic within fillers is the male demand and how that's outpaced female demand for both HA and BioStim fillers. So, a couple of dynamics there we'll continue to watch. I know there's a number of new products coming into the space, and so we'll see how that shapes up going through the end of the year.
Love that. Yeah, those are great stats you threw out there. I'm impressed you have those memorized. One thing that I'd love to mention too here, and I'm trying to think through, maybe you can help me here. There's a fascinating stat there that, we talk about dermal filler, kind of declining. And I love what you said. That's a great point, that a lot of the growth is due to new practices, that if you have an existing practice, you're probably not seeing it. But one stat that's fascinating, and I'm trying to deconstruct what this means, is 60% of dermal filler patients also included another treatment in their visit. So I think that's interesting, especially when you compared it in the white paper to 30% of neurotoxin and energy-based device procedures. So, twice as likely that if you're getting dermal fillers, you're getting another treatment as compared to neurotoxin and energy based. So do you have any idea, like, that's not good if I'm a practice owner and I'm like, oh no, I actually want dermal fillers because there's a 60% chance they'll get another treatment. Does BioStim, you think, translate the same way? Should we see that same 60%, or how would you adjust as a practice owner?
Yeah, I would say that that's pretty consistent across HA versus BioStim. I mean, just due to the nature of filler, it's typically, as we see in our data, those folks that come into aesthetic practice for a first time, as is kind of always been the case and continues to be the case as we see, it's those neurotoxin injections kind of being that gateway and leading to other treatments. So, while on the same visit, those that come in and have a neurotoxin injection may not have filler. Usually when they come back for their touch-up, as we're seeing, and we have some pretty interesting trend data on sort of the frequency that patients come back for neurotoxin usage. That tends to be a great time where it's like, okay, what else can I do that maybe they thought about it, they learned about it in their initial visit, perhaps, and being able to come back and explore that potential addition of some filler as well. I mean, but it's going to be interesting to see. I mean, there's kind of been that decline in HA demand. If that normalizes and BioStim continues to grow, it's going to be an interesting trend to watch.
Yeah, great point. So it sounds overall positive that we shouldn't see, from a BioStim perspective, maybe we'll see the same stats as dermal fillers. One other interesting thing when you talked about new practices being the ones that for the growth in the first half of 24, it's the same as the overall growth in the industry, right? I mean, I know that a lot of the bigger folks, especially last year, were saying, I don't know, it's not the same. It's not feeling as good. And so initially when I saw the stats of the nice growth 23 v 22, I thought, well, I mean, how's that possible? Because we're not hearing that, right? But
Right.
what the stats showed is the market overall grew, but it was the smaller, newer practices that were driving that growth. If you look at some of those charts in the report, if you're one of the larger ones, you're actually shrinking in revenue. So I thought that was just fascinating the way that you broke it out there, and it just helped explain a lot of my head scratching. So that was good. Um,
Yeah, I mean, to that point, it's actually interesting that you mentioned that. We typically look at the data overall from a full market perspective, thinking in billions of dollars, millions of dollars. But another way we can look at the data is actually to see on a per practice basis. And actually, I have a notes here since you brought that up, that the average practice actually had almost 10% less filler sale year over year. So even though there was some additional growth in the market and we're looking at Q1, right, that to your point, that average practice is maybe not realizing some of that pickup just because of increased openings of additional practices in the space. So that's something else that I think is interesting dynamic to track.
Wow, yeah, that is interesting. I actually didn't know that one. So thanks for sharing that, Erik. Learned something new already. Now, on the positive side, we talk of it's almost like the opposite end of the spectrum here. We're talking about dermal filler. Now, let's talk a little bit of one of the things that's just a huge growth spurt for the market: weight loss, semaglutide. That has been fascinating, and I want to kick it off by saying one of the things that really got me interested in this, because it's not just weight loss, semaglutide growth. It's also everything beyond that. So one of the things I think you mentioned there in the report is something like 50% of the people who walk into a metastatic practice are walking into it for the first time. So this has actually opened up, I think, a little bit of the market, and they're actually getting treatment at the practice. So another driver for medical aesthetics. I thought that was just really interesting, but also a disruptor in some cases. So, would love, Erik, if I can put you on the spot, tell us anything, everything you want to share about just the weight loss market, semaglutides, what you're seeing, just because it's been so dynamic.
Yeah, absolutely. I think uh, it's rare that, looking in other segments, other sectors, I've worked in consumer, et cetera, to have something this meaningful come in and change the dynamic of an industry so quickly. So it's fascinating to see, and something that we're definitely tracking overall. As an example, just to base on what we say in the report, in 2022, again, our average practice was 3% of their sales was to weight loss. From 2022 to 2023, that went from 3 to 8%. And this is on average overall. And that represents close to, on a market level, close to $1 billion in additional, or a shift in sort of that the spend. And so that really can dramatically change the patient spend profile for the practices that do offer this. And we are seeing that growth continue into 2024, although it has kind of reached a certain level. It's been growing, 236% as an example. So, right, that's a hard number to stick up with, but nonetheless, it's still growing. So far in Q1, Q2, it's around a 85% increase. So it has slowed down, but still nonetheless incredibly remarkable in terms of growth. But yeah, it's definitely shifted the just dynamic overall for those practices that offer this. And so some other interesting points, as you mentioned, is this going to be a gateway for new patients to come into these spas and practices that offer this weight loss treatment, to actually have them spend more on, or be introduced to, these aesthetic treatments when we're there. Now, that's still, even despite the richness of our data and the size of this growth, tremendous growth, it's still kind of a question that we're tracking. We don't fully know and can't answer fully, only because not every practice kind of offers the same treatment. Not every patient has the same spending capacity, kind of depending upon these factors. We're seeing kind of different trends overall, and it's not been one singular trend. But what we do know is that on average, those patients who are getting aesthetics treatments who start a weight loss treatment at a given practice, they're spending around 20 to 30% more
Hmm.
than they were when they were looking at or when they were purchasing their aesthetic treatment. So it's actually an increase in revenue. Now, the interesting thing, and this is really important for our manufacturer clients, is that we're seeing that increase in overall spend. So the med spa's revenue is increasing as a result, but that's coming at the expense of some of those other treatments that they were purchasing before, fillers, particularly on energy-based device, body contouring, and for plastic surgeons, like surgical procedures. That's coming out of the spend there pretty meaningfully. So it's going to be interesting to see in my conversations with folks in the industry across the energy-based device segment, kind of hearing some different results on how they think about this. So it's definitely a controversial area and one we're going to watch very closely.
Yeah. Now, one of the other things that we used to say when folks would call us why we love this space, right? We would go through our list. It's private pay. The demographics are getting younger. Now, more socially acceptable, so on and so forth. And one of the things that we would inevitably say is, by the way, more males are getting into it, which opens up not half of the US market, it's slightly less, but it opens up a significant part of the US market. I'd love it if you talked a little bit about that and any, either surprises or things you suspected to be true that were proven out.
Yeah, I think one of the main data points that we're able to understand from the data is that, and this, maybe to those who operate practices is no surprise, but yeah, that men spent on average almost $1,700 per visit, and that's versus women who would spend around 1,400 per visit. So the men that go into the practices typically spend quite a bit more. Now that's partially driven by the types of procedures they tend to get, hair transplantation, for example. Also, you talk to any injector, they know that men need more neurotoxin, so it usually results in the need for more product there. But nonetheless, it's been interesting to track that segment. I know kind of being and speaking to folks over the course of the past few years, there's always this talk about the male patient potential. And I think that's always seen as this new market, a new opportunity. The interesting thing that we're seeing is it's not as perhaps as explosive as maybe some of the hype was that we'd hear a few years ago. But nonetheless, like as I mentioned earlier with the dermal fillers, it can be a driver for growth, and we are seeing that spend increase with that men have. So in addition to spending more, they are continuing to grow. And I think it's going to be, again, another one of those areas to watch to say, does that trend really continue to become much more significant? Or is this something that we'll continue to hope for and wish for in the industry as many have the past few years?
So, Erik, with that said, there were a lot of things that we kind of discussed there as affirmations almost, things that we sort of knew, you and I, but we saw in the report that was super exciting. So, as you think about, the data that you go through every day, is there anything surprising that you have found?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of finding all this interesting stuff all the time in our data. I got to keep going back to the weight loss segment and GLP traffic kind of coming in. I mean, it's been interesting to look at some of those items that folks kind of, as we talked about before, moved on to. But another thing that I think has been surprising is like the number of patients that maybe just come in just for and don't move on to other aesthetic treatments, I mean, that does represent a portion of the patient. Now, time will tell if that evolves, but I think everyone is optimistic and hoping and looking for that kind of crossover. But we had seen a number of patients that had even just come in, had a couple weight loss visits, and then moved on and did not return to that practice. So that I think was a little bit more than we had hoped and that we'd wanted, and something that we'll be looking to track. The other thing that we found that was interesting, bring up another one, is a segment that I think is not often discussed, but really a key area for practices to drive revenue that we're seeing, and that's on the skincare product side, professional grade skincare, and for those that are looking to kind of sift through all of the advertising and influencer stuff. They want to go to their practitioner and understand like what skincare regimen should I use, what product should I use. So with that, one of the interesting metrics that we pulled out was that when a skincare purchase is made, when a patient comes in, gets skincare, 50% of the time, that's all they come in to get. So 50%, said another way, 50% of skincare product sales from practices are just from that visit, which represents. You could look at that in a few different ways, but represents an interesting opportunity. You have that traffic come into your practice, they make that purchase, and so are there other ways to interact with those patients, other ways to engage with those patients, build loyalty, et cetera, because they are coming in to make that purchase. So I thought that was interesting as well.
That's very interesting. And yeah, skincare is one we should dig into more sometime because depending on if you have your own, the margins are just so fantastic. That one always fascinates me. And then yeah, it builds some of what you were talking about, and it builds loyalty, which is pretty exciting. And it will be interesting to see what some of what you said at the beginning, which is it going to translate to additional services for some of these folks who still only come in for that? So, that'll be fun to see. I know that for us, I don't know if surprising. Actually, I think it was surprising. I mentioned it earlier. I know that for me, one of the things that we were looking at is like last year globally, like the M&A market was horrible, but the medical aesthetics market actually did really well. But one of the things that I think sponsors are having a tough time finding still, and they're having to come down a little bit, the ones who are willing to, is there aren't a lot of like true platforms in the space that can go to market, meaning not a lot of, organizations that are, multi-location, call it 7 or 8 or more, or a certain level of EBITDA, kind of cash flowing at a certain level, maybe 5 million or more of EBITDA cash flowing. Those just don't exist very much. And so this report was really interesting because with the growth of aesthetics, it was actually, again, the larger organizations that weren't growing. And that part maybe has to be fixed. Whoever can solve for that, I think, has a really nice opportunity to take their organization to market. So that was kind of cool to see, something that was, maybe a little bit surprising, because I would think if you have a well-established organization, you should be able to win against a new, medical aesthetic practice across the street, even with cannibalization. So that's interesting. It kind of proves out some of what you guys and we put together in the SWOT analysis of there's a big opportunity if you're willing to professionalize the business. But with that, I don't know, any thoughts there, Erik, or anything else that maybe we didn't cover in the white paper that you want to bring up?
Yeah, I think there's going to be some areas that we're going to continue to watch closely, as I mentioned, and not to be overly repetitive, but with GLP-1 subscriptions or prescriptions, rather, the regulatory environment there may evolve. And in medical spas, it's primarily, if not exclusively, compounded GLP treatments that can be sent via mail order, et cetera. And so in the event that the manufacturers of Ozempic, Wegovy, ramp up and want to clamp down on that, that could have another seismic impact on the space as well. So kind of understanding how that's trending is going to be something very much we want to watch. And I would say the other interesting areas also mentioned is on the skincare side. We have regenerative ingredients, exosomes, how's that's coming, that's showing up in a number of these treatments for aftercare. And that could also be a potential gateway to a new brand, building trust, et cetera. So that's going to be, I think, a lot of interesting stuff going on. But I know for me, those are things that we'd like to be able to really dive into in this upcoming year.
Those are great points. And yeah, I mean, we're seeing, you brought up exosomes, and we're seeing a lot of that as well. And just like the overall more and more holistic approach to a practice, to where a patient really is able to be treated for so many things. And that's something that we're seeing, and people are starting to meet the market there. So that will be fun to keep track of. So, let's talk about that, Erik. You're going to keep track of it. You're going to see where these things are going. Is this a one and done report? Or are there plans for future reports? What should we all expect there?
I don't know. You tell me. Should we do another one of these?
I think so. I mean, this was
Yeah,
fascinating, and I think it's badly needed too.
for sure. Yeah, I think, coming into the industry, it's as we kind of started off with, uh, just not knowing what's really going on. I mean, folks, they'll look at, on the manufacturer side anyway, their earnings reports or competitive earnings reports. On the practice side, yes, they have some chatter with their reps, or may have ability to see what's going on locally, but there's not this objective view into what's going on. And so we're seeing a lot of controversies, a lot of change, some growth, some decline, different areas. And so I think even just updating what we're seeing, and seeing how those metrics we tracked in this report, how that evolves over the course of the next year would be interesting. So, stay tuned. Perhaps next year around this time, could be providing an update, kind of showing some of the interesting dynamics that continue to evolve in the space.
I love it. Yeah, I'm ready when you are on that one. So it will be fascinating to see kind of a refresh of the stats, and see where some of the things like GLP-1 and exosomes and things of that nature, where they're heading, and how that's affecting practices in the overall industry. So that'll be a lot of fun to see. So, Erik, obviously Qsight has such amazing data. And we were, honored and proud to partner with you guys on this. If I'm someone listening that wants more info, what's a good way to reach out to you or the team?
Yeah, just you can email data@guidepoint.com, or of course reach out to me. I'm via email, ehaines, Haines @guidepoint.com. Would love to be able to engage with more folks really all across the industry. I know we've historically worked with some of the manufacturers, but given our trajectory and given the need for this kind of information, would love to hear from you. Would love to be able to understand kind of challenges that you're facing, you're seeing. How can our insights and our capabilities help support decisions that could be critical for businesses within the space? So really excited to continue to engage with the industry as we further develop these data sets and capabilities. So there's a lot that can be done.
Thank you for that, Erik. So yeah, now you know how to reach out to Erik. And one of our team members here, he said something that stuck with me, and it just brought it to mind. He said, "Data is the new oil," and I think a few people have said it, but he said, "Data is the new oil." And with that, thank you for bringing all this great data to the market. It's absolutely sorely needed. And it's so exciting to sift through this and actually prove out points that I think a lot of folks, either felt or had some data on. So thank you for that. And then also thank you, Erik, so much for coming on and spending time with us.
Yeah, absolutely. Anytime. Look forward to hopefully coming back at some point and seeing how things evolve. It's been great working with you and the team, the whole Skytale team. So look forward to more in the future for sure. And very happy to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
Likewise, thanks, Erik. Yeah, I can't believe it's been a few years now since we met. So it's been
Yeah.
fun continuing to work with you. And thank you for listening to another episode of Skytale Insights. We hope that you enjoy the episode and that you subscribe.